And we will start with South Asia's biggest story right now. New Delhi has asked all its diplomats to leave Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan and return to India. A special flight will be sent to the Afghan city to bring Indians back home. India's consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif has also asked all Indian nationals in the region to leave. Indian citizens wanting to leave by special flights have been asked to immediately register their details to facilitate the process. The situation unfolding in Afghanistan is causing ever-growing international concern. Take a look at how the provinces around Mazar-e-Sharif have fallen to the Taliban, and Mazar is next potentially on the list. It is the fourth largest city in Afghanistan. If it falls to the Taliban, it would signal the collapse of Kabul's control of the north of the country. That would raise major questions about the future of the government. But Mazar's longtime strongman Atta Mohammed Noor has vowed to fight to the end, saying there will be resistance until the last drop of blood. On Monday, Afghanistan's Interior Minister Mirwais Stanigsai said the Taliban is inching towards Mazar, but he also assured the people that the forces deployed in the region are strong enough to take down the enemy, and the Taliban has already suffered casualties.
The enemy attacks in Kunduz, Shibargan, Samangan and Saripul provinces are ongoing. The security forces have had resistance and advances in Kunduz and other cities. The enemy has suffered big losses. After coming under pressure, the enemy is now moving towards Mazar and Pule Khumri cities. But unfortunately, the security belts in Mazar are strong and the enemy has suffered casualties.
And we'll stick with this story, and WION's Anas Malik reports now from Mazar-e-Sharif.
I'm standing outside the Indian consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif. The Indian side has asked its citizens to voluntarily evacuate the city. There would be a special flight that would be leaving from Mazar-e-Sharif for India tonight, and they've asked the Indian citizens to get onto that flight because the condition of the city is not at how it used to be. Mazar-e-Sharif was used to be considered as one of the most safest cities in the entire country after Bamiyan, but since yesterday we've seen a renewed offensive being launched as well by the Afghan Taliban, and the Taliban are, it won't be wrong to say that the Taliban are at the gates of Mazar-Sharif. It would not be wrong to say that. They have been resisted, they have been pushed back by the militia and by the Afghan National Army. There was a fighting that was outgoing in the outskirts of the city as well. Anas Malik in Mazar, Afghanistan, for WION World is One.
Speaking about the Taliban's territorial expansion, the United States has said the situation in the country is not going in the right direction. On Monday, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said the United States is deeply concerned about the trend, but also that Afghan security forces had the capability to fight the insurgent group.
The reason why not is because it's their country to defend now. This is their struggle. The Commander-in-Chief has given us a new mission, and that mission is to draw down by the end of this month, and that's where we're moving to. What it looks like beyond that, I'm simply not going to speculate. But this is their country. These are their military forces. These are their provincial capitals. Their people to defend, and it's really going to come down to the leadership that they're willing to exude here at this particular moment.
Nonetheless, the State Department has said that United States negotiator on Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, will press the Taliban to stop its military offensive at the Doha talks this week. The United States says the increased tempo of Taliban military engagement, resulting in civilian casualties in armed conflict between the sides, and alleged human rights atrocities are of grave concern. Now, what we are looking at here is a map of the provincial capitals the Taliban now controls. It includes Shebbegan, Zaranj, Kunduz, Saripul, Talakan and Aibak, which is the latest capital to fall. President Ghani has met with political and resistance leaders to try and expedite efforts to mobilise, equip and strengthen public uprising forces. Over 1,000 people have been killed since the US announced its troop withdrawal. Homes, shops and villages have been destroyed to claim territory as the Taliban pressed ahead in the north. Fighting has also raged in the south of the country though. Afghan forces have been locked in heavy street-to-street fighting as the Taliban tries to take over Kandahar and Lashkar. Both are cities with Pashtun majorities from where the Taliban draw their strength. And as we've been saying, over 1,000 civilian lives have been lost since the US troops announced withdrawal from Afghanistan. And increasingly, children are being caught up in the killing. UNICEF says in the last 72 hours, 27 children have been killed by the Taliban.
Atrocities by the Taliban in Afghanistan are growing with each passing minute. And now the terror group has set its crosshairs dead set on Afghanistan's very future, its children. A shocking UNICEF report has revealed that 27 children were killed and 136 injured in the past 72 hours in Afghanistan. In Kandahar, 20 children have been killed, 130 injured. In Khost, 2 children killed and 3 injured. 5 children killed and 3 injured in Paktia province. Behind these numbers are brutal killings of children. Each one of these deaths is a personal tragedy. Their basic right to protection under the international humanitarian law has been disregarded. This heinous act marks the latest violence by the Taliban, which already preys on vulnerable children. It is an evidence of the brutal nature and scale of conflict in Afghanistan.
One of my grandchildren was hit by a bullet and I couldn't find a cemetery, so I put him in a hole. They took one of my sons by the head as if he was a sheep, cut off his head with a knife and threw his head away. I don't know if my son's body has been eaten by dogs or if people have buried him.
Children are being killed in bombings and crossfires. Young girls are being kidnapped by terrorists.
The Taliban are beating and looting people, and if there is a young girl or a widow in a family, they are forcibly taking them. We fled to protect our honor.
UNICEF also expressed concern over recruitment of children by the Taliban. The UNICEF has called on all parties to ensure that the children are protected. The war in Afghanistan has killed thousands and displaced millions in the last few decades.
Turning to Afghanistan, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Martin Griffiths, today expressed his extreme concern at the deteriorating situation in the country. More than 1,000 people have been killed or injured due to indiscriminate attacks against civilians in Helmand, Kandahar and Herat provinces in the last month alone. In a statement, Mr. Griffiths echoed calls by the Secretary General and members of the Security Council strongly condemning attacks against civilians, and he called for a ceasefire.
And now that the Taliban is tightening its grip over the country, people are fleeing their homes, and those who can afford to leave are leaving for good.
We are so exhausted and our hearts are darkened by life. How long will it be like this? Who can be happy with this situation? Look at the women and children and how they are all homeless.
The Taliban have taken our areas and they forced us to move. We were stuck in the middle of the fighting. They set fire to everything and we could bring only a bag with us.
As the UNICEF says, children should not be paying for the worsening conflict with their childhood. Only a complete end of hostilities can protect Afghanistan's children. As long as the conflict rages on, the children's right to thrive is compromised, their futures jeopardized, and their contributions to their nation's prospects diminished. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
In a bid to fight a staff shortage and ease the pressure on hospitals here in the United Kingdom, the Royal London Hospital has absorbed 50 international doctors, mostly refugees, to work in intensive care units amid the ongoing pandemic. The project is part of a £15 million NHS England scheme.
This is Mohammed Saud, a trained doctor from Syria. A refugee and now one of the 50 international doctors recruited by the Royal London Hospital. He now works at the intensive care unit here. The pandemic resulted in immense pressure on healthcare workers, and Saud is one of the many refugee doctors who were brought in during the second wave to help battle the pandemic.
From the time you decide you need new specialist doctors, it takes a minimum of 10, sometimes 15 years to really train them. These doctors come already trained in terms of monetary value. That's very cheap.
Having left their home countries, these refugee doctors found work as medical support workers, all thanks to a £15 million NHS England scheme. Fleeing war in their home countries, these doctors are now at the front line in the UK, battling the raging pandemic.
It was really overwhelming working here, and see a lot of people around you, suffering.
It was a win-win situation. The doctors did all the prerequisite training, which proved to be beneficial for the NHS, as they are no longer required to pay for their training, further saving more time and resources.
There's a shortage of more than 1,000 consultant radiologists. And Mohammed was fully trained in Syria. He saves the NHS money by not having to train him. And he benefits the patients here because we have a shortage of doctors.
The NHS scheme is helping overwhelmed hospitals in the UK fight staff shortage. It is also helping foreign medical graduates living in the UK to pass the specified exams required to register with the General Medical Council. At present, there are over 1,000 refugees under the scheme. This addition to the staff is helping clear the backlog of patients awaiting treatment. But what happens when the pandemic is brought under control?
Just like for me, like even talking to my colleagues, is this the end of the journey as a doctor? Once you finish, you graduate from the School of Medicine, all your ambitions, you can't achieve anything. So is this the end of the journey or are we beginning?
Bureau Report, WION World is One.
South Korea and the United States will go ahead with joint military drills this week. That's despite a warning from North Korea that the drills would set back progress in improving inter-Korean relations. Calling Seoul treacherous, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said that the drills were an unwelcome, self-destructive action that threatened the North Korean people and raised tensions in the Korean peninsula. She also warned that North Korea would prepare to have a strong preemptive strike capability to counter the increasing US military threat. Kim Yo-jong's latest remarks come despite a recent thaw in the Korean peninsula, prompted in part by a series of personal letters exchanged between her brother and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The two sides last month restored cross-border communications that were severed more than a year ago. But North Korea's reaction to the drills threatens to upend efforts by the South Korean president to restore relations. The drills, called Crisis Management Staff Training, are designed to examine the Allies' readiness to respond to a potential contingency. They'll run until Friday before switching to full-scale exercises scheduled to be held from August 16 to the 26th. South Korea's defense ministry says the timing, scale and formation of the drills are not yet finalized. The United States has around 28,500 troops in South Korea as a legacy of the 1950 Korean War. That conflict ended in an armistice rather than a peace deal, which left the peninsula in a technical state of war. The exercises were scaled back in recent years to facilitate talks aimed at dismantling Pyongyang's nuclear and missile programs in return for an end to US sanctions. But negotiations collapsed in 2019, and both sides say it's up to the other to take the first step. To Greece now, and devastating wildfires have been burning across the country for a week. Thousands of people and dozens of villages have been evacuated. Over 500 fires have been burning across the country, the biggest one in Evia, Greece's second biggest island, located just off the mainland east of Athens. Following growing public anger at delays and breakdowns in the government's response, the Greek Prime Minister has apologised for failures in tackling the wildfires.
As fires burned unabated in many parts of Greece for a seventh day, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis on Monday went on television to apologise for failures in tackling the devastating wildfires that have sent thousands of people fleeing, destroying homes and businesses as well as huge swaths of forest land.
The extent of the destruction, especially in Evia and Attica, blackens all of our hearts, and I am first to apologize for whatever weaknesses existed. I completely understand the pain of our citizens who saw their houses and property burning, the upheaval of having to abruptly leave their homes.
The biggest front was on Evia, Greece's second largest island located just off the mainland east of Athens. Strong winds on Monday fueled flare-ups in Evia, after appearing to ease earlier in the day. Water-bombing aircraft struggled to operate because of the large plumes of smoke blanketing the area, authorities said. The fires broke out last week during Greece's worst heat wave in 3 decades, with searing temperatures and dry heat causing tinderbox conditions. There has been growing public anger at delays and breakdowns in the government's response. Hundreds of protesters gathered outside of the parliament building in Athens on Monday.
We are protesting against the government that has let all the country burn because they put profits before people. We are protesting because they give millions for buying warplanes and paying for the police and not for the fire brigades.
Prime Minister Mitsotakis, in his televised address, promised that mistakes would be identified and rectified and called for unity. Almost 1,000 firefighters, 9 aircraft, and 200 vehicles have been sent to Greece from other European countries to help with the wildfires. In addition, Greece said on Monday it was expecting 2 aircraft from Turkey and an additional plane from Russia. More than 2,000 residents and tourists have been evacuated by ferry since last Tuesday. The images captured them departing against the backdrop of a dark red sky.
Moving across Europe, and Venice is currently witnessing out-of-season flooding. It's brought back memories of 2019 when the city suffered its worst floods since the 1960s. Experts have attributed Venice's unusual high tide activity to climate change. Over the weekend, its famous St. Mark's Square flooded twice. Water levels were forecast to rise above 1 metre. This phenomenon is called acqua alta, which translates to high water. Many tourists are trying to keep a brave face despite the high water levels. But experts say a combination of factors could be behind what's happening, with climate change being the most foremost. Venice is situated in a lagoon in the northern part of the Adriatic Sea. Britain's Prince Andrew has been sued for allegedly sexually abusing a woman who says she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. A civil complaint has been filed in the United States District Court in Manhattan. The complainant, Virginia Guifra, claims she was assaulted by the Duke of York around 2 decades ago when she was 17. Prince Andrew has always denied the claims.
A woman filed a lawsuit in the United States on Monday accusing Britain's Prince Andrew of sexual abuse. Virginia Giuffre alleges that she was trafficked to the Duke of York by the late financier Jeffrey Epstein and sexually abused and battered by him when she was 17 years old. In a statement, Giuffre said, quote, "I am holding Prince Andrew accountable for what he did to me. The powerful and rich are not exempt from being held responsible for their actions." Queen Elizabeth's second son has previously said that he had no recollection of meeting Giuffre and denied her public allegations. Giuffre is suing the Duke under the Child Victims Act, a New York state law allowing many child abuse victims to pursue claims against their alleged abusers even if the abuse occurred decades earlier. The lawsuit came as a fund created to compensate Epstein's victims has awarded more than $121 million to about 138 people. Epstein killed himself in a New York jail in 2019 while awaiting trial on charges of sexually exploiting dozens of girls and women. The Duke is one of the most prominent people linked to Epstein, and their friendship has caused embarrassment to Britain's royal family.
Sri Lanka's government is being accused of militarising education. It's introduced a new law to put military leaders on university boards. It's part of a growing trend under President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Teachers and students across the country are protesting against the new plan.
Sri Lanka's teachers are pulling out of classes. Their students are on the streets protesting. It is a fight for the soul of Sri Lankan education. A campaign to keep soldiers out of academia. At the centre of this row is a new legislation called the KDU Bill, or the Kotewala National Defence University Bill. The government says the law concerns the administration of one university. The teachers say that it sets a precedent. The university in question is the Kotewala National Defence University, established in the 1980s. The objective was to train cadets for the tri-services, basically a military institute. But the KDU is not governed by the University Grants Commission. Instead, it has its own board of governors. This wasn't a problem until the government moved to empower KDU. The new bill endows it with the power to accredit other universities. This would create a parallel education system managed by the military. It's a nightmare for the country's teachers and students. They say the military will stamp out dissent and free thought. But the government sees it differently. It has arrested dozens of teachers across the island. They are accused of violating COVID protocols. Since Gotabaya Rajapaksa came to power, Sri Lanka has seen a rapid militarization, not just in education, but policy making as a whole. The United Nations cited 28 appointments, all of them former military officers to key administrative positions. This new bill is an extension of the militarization. It will limit power to a military cabal, slowly draining Sri Lanka's democratic principles. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
That is all we have time for on this WION Live broadcast from London. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, and do stay tuned to WION.